Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some records are buried so deep, the dead can't even find them. Tonight we unearth Case File 734 Alpha, a ghost in the National Archives, detailing an event that, according to every official source, never happened. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some questions are not meant to have answers. They are meant to have victims. Welcome to the Obsidian Archive. Every government, every intelligence agency, every institution of power has a basement. Not always a literal one, but a metaphorical repository for its secrets. A place where history is curated, sanitized, and, when necessary, buried. We call this the Deep Archive. It's a labyrinth of steel shelves, climate-controlled vaults, and now, petabytes of encrypted data stored on servers humming silently in undisclosed locations. It is the final resting place for inconvenient truths. The work here is methodical, bordering on sacred. Archivists are the silent priests of this order, tasked not with interpretation, but with preservation and containment. They handle documents that could rewrite textbooks, start wars, or shatter the fragile consensus we call reality. They are trained to be incurious, to see only catalog numbers and classification codes, not the human stories bleeding through the ink. But systems, no matter how perfect, have ghosts, glitches, anomalies. Our story begins with one such anomaly, discovered not by a whistleblower or a spy, but by a mid-level data clerk named Elias Vance during a routine system migration in the late 1990s. His job was to ensure that the digital ghosts of physical documents were transferred flawlessly to a new, more secure network. It was mind-numbing work, until he found it. A file that had no physical counterpart, a digital specter. It was a single empty directory, but its access permissions were unlike anything he had ever encountered. Not just top secret, not compartmentalized, but protected by a layer of cryptographic security that seemed alien in its complexity. It had no creation date, no author, no access log. It was a perfect void, a digital black hole. But the most unsettling part was its reference tag. In the logs of dozens of other highly classified files detailing everything from Cold War espionage to advanced aerospace projects, there were faint, corrupted references to this phantom directory. It was like finding footnotes in a history book that all pointed to a single page that had been surgically removed before the book was ever printed. Elias, against every protocol and every instinct for self-preservation, began to dig. He didn't try to breach the file. He knew that was impossible and suicidal. Instead, he chased the breadcrumbs. He cross-referenced the files that pointed to it, searching for a common thread. What he found was a pattern of absence. He found that major historical events, scientific discoveries, and unexplained phenomena all seemed to have a piece of their narrative missing. A crucial 5 minutes from a flight recorder, a page torn from a physicist's journal, a witness who inexplicably recanted their testimony. And in the margins of the internal reports on these sanitized events, he would find the same alphanumeric string, the same reference to the void. He was looking at the architecture of a cover-up so vast, so profound, that its true subject was completely unknowable. The anomaly wasn't just a file, it was the tombstone for a question. A question so dangerous The entire global intelligence apparatus had spent half a century not answering it, but trying to make sure no one ever knew how to ask it. The phantom directory that haunted the archive was just a pointer, a signpost to a deeper, older secret. Before the digital age, information was physical. It had weight, it could be held, locked away, and, if necessary, burned. Elias Vance's digital anomaly was the ghost of a physical file. A file that, according to the few who whispered about it in the intelligence community, was known only as Designation 734 Alpha. This was not a file you could request. It did not appear on any inventory. Officially, it did not exist. But unofficially, it was the stuff of legend, the ultimate conspiracy theory whispered by grizzled case officers to scare new recruits. To even speak its designation in a secure facility was grounds for immediate dismissal and psychological evaluation. The file was said to be stored in a location known only as the Vault, a sub-basement beneath a sub-basement, protected not by technology, but by layered, interlocking human protocols. To access it required 3 simultaneous, authenticated commands from 3 separate high-level directorates, one of which was rumored to be a shadow directorate, whose existence was itself classified. The physical file was described not as a manila folder, but as a lead-lined case, sealed with tamper-evident locks that had not been broken in over 50 years. The stories surrounding it were chilling. There was the account of a young ambitious analyst in the 1970s who, through sheer brilliance, managed to deduce the file's existence and location. He was found 2 days later in his apartment, a victim of a sudden, massive cerebral hemorrhage. His research was gone. Then there was the 4-star general in the 1980s, who, believing it pertained to a matter of national security, attempted to use his authority to force access. He was quietly retired for health reasons within a week. His career, his legacy, erased. These weren't just scare tactics. They were data points. The system wasn't just hiding the file. It was aggressively defending itself from anyone who got close. The file acted like an informational contagion. Proximity to it, or even knowledge of it, seemed to trigger a catastrophic immune response from the bureaucracy. The metadata that Elias Vance was able to piece together was sparse but terrifying. File 734 Alpha contained exactly 1 photograph, 3 pages of scientific data, a 17-minute audio recording on magnetic tape, and a single typed page containing a question. That was it. The contents were minimal, yet they were deemed so paradigm-altering that an entire infrastructure of denial was built around them. Why? What could a single photograph and a few pages of data contain that would be worth this level of secrecy? What audio recording could threaten the foundations of our institutions? And most importantly, what was the question? The designation itself, 734 Alpha, was believed to be a code. Alpha, signifying a beginning, a primary event. 734 was a mystery. Some believed it was a date, others a coordinate, others a quantum mechanics reference. All that was known for sure was that 734 Alpha was a Pandora's box, and those who guarded it believed that opening it wouldn't just release evil into the world, it would fundamentally redefine the meaning of world. To understand the fear surrounding File 734 Alpha, we must travel back to its genesis, to the moment when a raw, unfiltered truth landed on the desk of someone with the power to bury it. We go back to a time before digital archives and cryptographic security, to an era of smoke-filled rooms, clattering typewriters, and men who believed they carried the weight of the world on their shoulders. Our focus is a man named Arthur Croft, a senior figure in post-war intelligence. Croft was not a field agent. He was a thinker, a strategist. His job was to look at the pieces of the puzzle: agent reports, signals intelligence, scientific papers, and see the bigger picture. He was a guardian of the official narrative. One autumn afternoon, a courier delivered a locked briefcase to his office. It was not from any of the usual departments. The dispatch order was signed with a symbol he had never seen before. Inside was not a report, but a collection of raw, unanalyzed data from a remote monitoring station. The kind of station that wasn't on any official maps. As he reviewed the contents, the blood drained from his face. There was a seismograph reading that defied geology, an atmospheric radiation count that had no known terrestrial or celestial source, and a series of photographs of something that should not have been there. The data was impossible. It contradicted fundamental laws of physics. It was a tear in the fabric of accepted science. But it was real. The instruments were calibrated, the observers were reliable. Croft was a man who had seen the worst of humanity. He had reviewed battlefield reports from Normandy and read decrypted cables that spoke of unthinkable atrocities. He was not easily shaken. But this was different. This wasn't about human evil or political maneuvering. This threatened the very bedrock of human understanding. It presented a reality so alien, so far outside the established framework, that he believed its public disclosure would lead to societal collapse, panic, anarchy, the end of progress. He imagined the headlines, the scientific debates turning into religious crusades, the collapse of faith in government, in science, in everything. He made a choice. He took the data and the photographs, and he began the first redaction. This wasn't just about blacking out a few words. It was a new, more profound kind of information control. He personally classified each piece of evidence under a new, purpose-built designation, 734 Alpha. He then initiated protocols to discredit the monitoring station, reassign its personnel, and alter the public records. He commissioned scientific papers that offered plausible, mundane explanations for similar but less extreme phenomena. He created a cover story, a piece of fiction so compelling that over the decades it would be accepted as fact, even by those within the intelligence community. He wasn't covering up a crime. In his mind, he was performing a necessary surgery on history, cutting out a malignant truth to save the patient. He wrote a single-page summary, not of the event, but of its implications. He ended it with a question, the same question that haunted him from the moment he saw the data. He then locked it all away, creating the multi-layered security protocols himself, ensuring that only a true crisis of civilization could ever justify its reopening. Arthur Croft was the first guardian of the question. He died believing he had saved the world by creating a secret that could one day destroy it. Every secret has an origin story. Every classified file begins with an event. For file 734 Alpha, all evidence, all the fragmented breadcrumbs, point to a single 24-hour period. October 12th, 1967. On the surface, it was an unremarkable Thursday. The world was preoccupied with the Vietnam War, the space race, and cultural upheaval. But in a handful of isolated, disconnected locations, the impossible was happening. Let's reconstruct that day. At 0430 GMT, a DUW line radar station in the high Arctic, Station 3B, manned by 2 Air Force technicians, registered an object. It wasn't just fast, it moved in a way that defied inertia. Instantaneous acceleration, right-angle turns at hypersonic speeds, It was not an aircraft, not a missile, not a meteor. The technicians reported it, their voices a mixture of confusion and fear. 15 minutes later, the base went silent. A rescue team dispatched hours later found the station intact. But the 2 men were gone. The radar logs were wiped clean. At 0442 GMT, thousands of miles away at the Palomar Observatory in California, an astronomer conducting a routine spectral analysis of a distant star cluster recorded a massive, inexplicable energy burst. It did not originate from the star cluster, but seemed to emanate from a point much closer, a point within our own solar system that was supposed to be empty. The energy signature was unlike anything in the known spectrum. His equipment malfunctioned, and the data was lost in a system crash. When the system was rebooted, all traces of the anomaly were gone. He was later encouraged by his superiors to dismiss it as an equipment flaw. At 0451 GMT, a geological survey team in the remote wilderness of the Ural Mountains recorded a seismic event. It was not an earthquake. The P waves and S waves were inverted, suggesting the force originated not from below the ground, but from above it. The event lasted for precisely 3.7 seconds and left no crater, no physical trace. The team's report was intercepted by military intelligence and classified before it ever reached the public domain. These were not isolated incidents. They were data points, a radar track, an energy signature, a seismic anomaly. Individually, they were explainable, dismissible, but someone somewhere was collecting them. Someone was putting the pieces together. The men who visited the radar station, the superiors who silenced the astronomer, the agents who buried the geological report, they were all part of a nascent, shadowy protocol. A rapid response system designed not to investigate, but to erase. October 12, 1967, was the day something happened that was so far outside our understanding of the world that the only response was to pretend it didn't. The contents of File 734 Alpha, the photograph, the audio, the data, are the only known surviving consolidated records of that day. It is the raw evidence of an event that officially never occurred. And it all leads to the question on that final page. A question born from the impossible movements on a radar screen, the alien light in a telescope, and the inverted shaking of the Earth. The question is not, are we alone? It's clear the architects of this secret already knew the answer to that. The question buried in the heart of the archive, the one no one is allowed to ask, is far more terrifying. It is, what did they lose? Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. High, in the desolate, wind-swept expanse of the Atacama Desert, where the air is so thin and dry it feels like a gateway to the cosmos, stands the skeletal remains of the Sentinel Peak Observatory. It wasn't the largest, nor the most famous, but for a brief, classified period in the late 1970s, it was the most important facility on Earth. Officially, its mission was deep space radio astronomy, charting pulsars and mapping galactic hydrogen clouds. Its public funding was modest, its staff a small, dedicated team of academics. But archived records, the few that weren't systematically erased, tell a different story. Sentinel Peak was a listening post, built with a quiet urgency and funded by a labyrinth of shadow budgets that traced back to clandestine defense projects. Its true purpose was not to map the known, but to listen for the unknown. At its heart was Dr. Aris Thorne, a theoretical astrophysicist whose genius was matched only by his reclusiveness. Thorne wasn't interested in pulsars. His published work was a smokescreen for his real obsession, the search for what he called structured, non-random signals of intelligent origin. He believed the universe wasn't just broadcasting noise, it was whispering, and he was building the ear to listen. The observatory's primary instrument, the Arecibo's shadow, as the staff nicknamed it, was a marvel of bespoke engineering. While it appeared conventional, its core contained a series of custom-built cryogenic correlators and quantum signal processors, technologies that theoretically shouldn't have existed for another 30 years. Blueprints, recovered from a forgotten sub-basement, show annotations in Thorne's own hand, detailing equations that defy conventional physics. He wasn't just filtering signals. He was trying to unscramble a lock. He was looking for a key. The staff Thorne recruited were the best in their fields, but they were also outsiders, academics who had been professionally sidelined for their unorthodox theories. They were people willing to entertain the impossible. From 1976 to 1978, they worked in complete isolation, their lives governed by the silent rotation of the dish and the crackle of cosmic static. Declassified personnel logs speak of a palpable tension, a sense of anticipation that bordered on religious fervor. They weren't just conducting an experiment. They felt they were on the verge of a revelation, a discovery that would recontextualize human existence. They were preparing to ask the one question that had echoed through our history since the first human looked up at the stars. But they had no idea that the universe was about to ask a question of its own. On October 11, 1978, at 03:17 a.m. local time, the universe answered. It wasn't a message in binary or a friendly mathematical sequence. It was something far more profound and terrifying. The staff at Sentinel Peak logged it as Signal Designation 78B. Privately, they called it the Echo. It arrived from the direction of the Bhuta's void, an enormous, almost empty region of space. But the signal didn't behave like anything that had traveled across billions of light years. It was clean, impossibly so, with no degradation, no redshift. It was as if its point of origin was in the room with them. Dr. Thorne's recovered, heavily water-damaged journal describes it not as a broadcast, but as a resonance. "It is not a signal," he wrote. "It is a response. It waited for us to build the lock, and then it provided the key. It knows we are here. The terrifying part is not that it knows, but how it knows." The phenomenon was interactive. When the team transmitted prime numbers, a classic hello from humanity, the signal didn't return prime numbers. It returned a complex fractal pattern that, when decoded, perfectly mapped the neural structure of the human brain. When they sent a diagram of our solar system, it returned a star chart of a system that does not exist, but one whose orbital mechanics were perfectly, impossibly stable. The signal was a mirror, reflecting not what we were, but what we could be, or perhaps what something else already was. Panic began to set in. This wasn't first contact, it was an intelligence test on a cosmic scale, and the team felt they were failing. The data streams were overwhelming, filled with what appeared to be biological, chemical, and physical data that rewrote everything they knew. It was a library of forbidden knowledge. The central, terrifying component of the phenomenon was what Thorne dubbed the query pulse. Periodically, the signal would cease its mimicry and emit a single, complex burst. This burst was not data in a conventional sense. Analysis showed it was a carrier wave modulated to interact directly with the quantum state of matter. In essence, it was a question. Not a question in language, but a question in physics. A question posed to the very fabric of their reality. The team realized their work had crossed a threshold. They had asked, "Is anyone out there?" And the universe had responded, "Who are you to ask?" This was the birth of the question no one was allowed to ask. The implications were staggering. To even comprehend the nature of the query pulse was to confront a reality where humanity was not a dominant species, but perhaps merely a nascent, barely sentient organism under the microscope of a vastly superior intelligence. The discovery of the phenomenon was not celebrated. It was buried. The transition from groundbreaking discovery to state-level secret was brutally swift. On October 19, 1978, exactly 8 days after Signal 78B was first logged, Sentinel Peak went dark. All communication channels, secure phone lines, radio uplinks, even emergency beacons, ceased transmission simultaneously. It wasn't a power failure. It was a professionally executed amputation from the outside world. A subsequent maintenance review, officially triggered by the communications blackout, sent a military recovery team to the remote site. The report, declassified in 2003 with 98% of its content redacted, describes a scene of chilling order. The observatory was not in disarray. It was sterile. Every logbook was gone. Every magnetic tape was wiped by powerful electromagnetic pulses. Every chalkboard was scrubbed clean. The only thing left behind was the faint scent of ozone and a deep, unnerving silence. The personnel had vanished. Dr. Aris Thorne and his entire team of 12 scientists were gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no packed bags, no farewell notes. They were simply erased from the location and soon from public record. Official inquiries sent to their families were met with form letters stating they had been reassigned to a new, long-term classified project and were unreachable. But whispers from inside the intelligence community, fragments from a whistleblower who came forward decades later under the pseudonym Cassandra, paint a much darker picture. The staff were not reassigned. They were quarantined. They were now considered a security risk of the highest order, not because of what they knew, but because of what they had been exposed to. The phenomenon, particularly the query pulse, was treated not as a signal, but as a potential contagion, an informational virus that could rewrite human perception. The fear was that the question itself was dangerous. The silence was not just about hiding the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. It was about preventing a dangerous idea from spreading. In the weeks that followed, a coordinated global effort was quietly initiated. Radio observatories from Jodrell Bank in the UK to Parkes in Australia reported sudden, inexplicable equipment failures. Key data archives from similar deep space listening projects were accidentally destroyed in fires or floods. The scientific community was gently nudged away from SETI research, with funding mysteriously drying up and key proponents finding their careers stalled. The message was clear, though never spoken. Stop listening. Do not engage. Do not ask the question. The silence on the airwaves wasn't an absence of a signal. It was the presence of a guard. Every cover-up of this magnitude requires a name, a designation filed away in the deepest, darkest vaults of national security. The global effort to erase the Sentinel Peak incident and its implications was codenamed Operation Silent slate. Its objective was not merely to conceal, but to obliterate, to wipe the slate of history so clean that future generations would never even know a question had been asked, let alone answered. Silent Slate was a masterpiece of psychological warfare waged against our own collective curiosity. Its first phase was disinformation. The official story for the Sentinel Peak closure was a catastrophic equipment malfunction combined with a severe solar flare, a narrative just plausible enough to satisfy cursory journalistic inquiry. Articles were planted in scientific journals by government-friendly academics, discrediting the very methodologies Dr. Thorne had used. His work was posthumously labeled as fringe science, the product of a brilliant but unstable mind. The second phase was containment. The quarantined scientists of Sentinel Peak were subjected to intense debriefing and re-education. The Cassandra whistleblower alleged these sessions were designed to create cognitive dissonance, to make the scientists doubt their own memories and the validity of the data they had collected. They were made to feel as if they had collectively hallucinated the phenomenon. Their subsequent lives were monitored, their communications intercepted, their every move tracked until the day they died. They were living ghosts, carriers of a truth too dangerous to speak. But the most insidious phase of Operation Silent Slate was its long-term cultural programming. Why was this knowledge deemed so catastrophic? Leaked fragments of a psychosocial impact assessment from the project suggest the answer. The phenomenon, and specifically the query pulse, didn't just challenge our place in the cosmos. It invalidated it. The data implied that human consciousness, free will, and even our perception of linear time were mere byproducts of a far more complex system, a system we had inadvertently disturbed. The question was not, are we alone? The question was, are we even real? Answering it, or even understanding it on a global scale, would have shattered every religious, social, and philosophical foundation of human civilization. It would have been an extinction-level event for our reality. Operation Silent Slate was deemed a success. The world moved on, blissfully unaware, but the silence it left behind is deafening. It suggests that this may not have been the first time, that history is littered with other silent slates, other moments when we stumbled upon a truth too large for us to hold. We live in the quiet, manicured garden they created for us, never knowing that just beyond the wall lies a universe far stranger and more terrifying than we could ever dare to imagine. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some truths are not just buried. They are encased in concrete and sunk to the bottom of the deepest ocean. Narrator. Every cover-up begins with a story, a plausible, digestible, and ultimately forgettable story. For the 5,700 residents of Havenwood, Colorado, that story was officially titled the Havenwood Geological Realignment Initiative. On the morning of October 12, 1978, the official narrative was born. According to federal reports and the sanitized press releases that followed, government seismologists had detected a critical and imminent threat. A deep, unstable fault line, previously dormant, was showing signs of catastrophic failure directly beneath the town. The risk, they claimed, was a subduction event of unprecedented magnitude, capable of swallowing the entire valley in minutes. The language was precise, clinical, and terrifying. It was designed to create panic, but a controlled panic. The solution was presented not as a choice, but as an imperative. immediate, and total evacuation. The operation was lauded in the media as a triumph of proactive governance. Newsreels from the time, now archived and collecting dust, show orderly lines of citizens' boarding buses, their faces etched with concern but also relief. They were the lucky ones, saved from nature's wrath by a benevolent and watchful government. News anchors spoke in grave tones about the tragedy that was averted. They praised the efficiency of FEMA and the National Guard, who reportedly moved an entire town in under 72 hours. There were no casualties, no major incidents. It was a textbook success. The official reports, which we managed to obtain through a Freedom of Information Act request, are hundreds of pages long. They are filled with seismic charts, geological surveys, and risk assessment models. They detail the establishment of a permanent exclusion zone, a 50-square-mile perimeter around the now empty valley. The reason given? Ongoing seismic instability and potential for hazardous subterranean gas leaks. The story was airtight. It explained the empty homes, the abandoned lives, the military presence. It gave a reason for why no one could ever go back. For the rest of the country, the story of Havenwood was a fleeting headline, a near disaster, a feel-good story of a government that worked, a story that was, by all accounts, closed. But a perfect story is often the most deceptive one. And in the margins of this flawless narrative, a question began to fester. It was a question born from details the official story conveniently omitted. The cutting of all communication lines 12 hours before the evacuation began, the confiscation of all personal cameras and journals, and the strange, low-frequency hum that residents reported in the days leading up to the event. The official narrative was a fortress of facts and figures, built to withstand scrutiny. But its true purpose was not to explain what happened. Its purpose was to ensure no one ever thought to ask the real question, narrator. Before it was a headline, before it was an exclusion zone, Havenwood was home. It wasn't a place of geological significance. It was a place of human significance. It had a main street with a single traffic light, a diner called the Morning Star, where the coffee was always hot, and a high school whose football team, the Havenwood Prospectors, never won a single championship, but drew the whole town out on Friday nights anyway. It was a place defined by its people. The miners who worked the silver seams in the surrounding mountains, the teachers who knew every child by name, the families who had lived in the same clapboard houses for generations. This is the reality that the official narrative erased. The evacuation, as remembered by the few who dare to speak of it, was not the orderly procession seen on television. It was a blitz. It began just before dawn, not with a warning siren, but with the thunder of military trucks and the blinding glare of searchlights. Soldiers in full biohazard suits, their faces obscured by gas masks, moved house to house. There were no explanations, only commands shouted through muffled speakers. People were given minutes to gather what they could carry in a single bag. Family pets were left behind. Prized possessions, photo albums, the tangible pieces of a life, all abandoned. The residents weren't evacuated. They were extracted. They were processed like evidence from a crime scene. One survivor, speaking to an underground journalist in 1994 under the condition of absolute anonymity, described the scene. They weren't there to save us. They were there to contain us. They took everything, our names, our histories. We got on those buses as residents of Havenwood. When we got off, hundreds of miles away, we were told Havenwood never existed. And in the official record, it doesn't. After the evacuation, a systematic erasure began. All official maps printed after 1978 show the valley as an unnamed, uninhabited part of the national forest. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, and property deeds originating from Havenwood were recalled and replaced with documents citing neighboring counties. The town was not just evacuated, it was expunged. It was a digital and bureaucratic demolition. Today, the exclusion zone is still there. Satellite imagery shows nothing but regrown forest, where a town of over 5,000 people once stood. There are no foundations, no broken streets, no ruins. There is nothing. The official story says the land is too unstable to visit. But the whispers among the displaced suggest another reason. They say the ground itself is wrong, that whatever happened in Havenwood was not a geological event, but a biological or existential one, and that the town was not abandoned. It was sterilized.
Narrator. The people of Havenwood were scattered like seeds in the wind. They were given new identities, small government stipends, and a single, non-negotiable condition: silence. They were never to speak of Havenwood. They were never to contact their old neighbors. They were to forget the life they had lived. But memory is not a file that can be deleted. It is a ghost that haunts the bloodline. For the first generation, the silence was a suffocating blanket of fear. They lived with the constant anxiety of being watched. They suffered from a host of unexplained medical issues, rashes, neurological disorders, and a pervasive, unshakable melancholy. They had nightmares not of an earthquake, but of a low, resonant hum, of a sky that turned the color of rust, and of the masked figures who took them from their homes. They kept their secret, but it poisoned them from the inside out. It was their children and their children's children who began to piece together the fragments. They grew up in homes with no old family photos, no stories from the old town. There was a gaping hole in their family history, a black void their parents and grandparents refused to approach. But the truth would leak out in unguarded moments. A grandmother, lost in dementia, might whisper a name: Havenwood. A father, after too many drinks, might talk about a sound that made the fillings in your teeth ache. They heard whispers of the wrong sky and the thing in the woods. These children, now adults, became quiet investigators of their own lineage. They found each other on obscure internet forums in the early days of the web, drawn together by shared, half-remembered phrases and a common, unexplainable sense of loss. They compared notes on their families' strange medical histories. They spoke of the inherited trauma, the feeling of being a refugee from a country that no longer exists on any map. It was this generation that gave a name to the central mystery.
They called it the question. Not what happened at Havenwood. That was too simple. The question was deeper, more terrifying. What were we running from? Or even worse, what did they make us leave behind? The silence imposed upon their parents had not destroyed the truth. It had transformed it into a myth, a dark fairy tale passed down in hushed tones, a story of a town that saw something it wasn't supposed to see, and a government that would go to any length to ensure the question no one was allowed to ask would never be answered.
Narrator. For decades, the question was nothing more than speculation, a conspiracy theory fueled by whispers and trauma. There was no proof, no document, no official crack in the wall of silence. Until March 2022. Due to a clerical error in a mass declassification of Cold War-era documents, a single page from a file designated Project Chimera, Ethelberg Sub-Study was accidentally released. The name was wrong, Ethelberg, not Havenwood, perhaps an internal code name, or another town that suffered a similar fate. But the coordinates listed at the top of the page, though partially redacted, pointed directly to the empty valley in Colorado. The document is a nightmare of bureaucratic euphemism. It is a post-incident report dated October 30th, 1978, just 18 days after the evacuation. Most of the page is covered in thick black bars, but the words that remain are chilling. One section reads, "Initial containment of the resonance event failed. Subject population exhibited unforeseen psycho-auditory response. Mass hysteria compromised procedural integrity." The official narrative spoke of seismic instability. This fragment speaks of a resonance event. It doesn't mention an earthquake. It mentions a psycho-auditory response. The story was about saving people from the ground beneath their feet. This document hints that the threat was in their minds. Another visible line item is even more terrifying. Under the heading Asset Integrity, it states, "Local flora and fauna exhibit Class 4 mimetic adaptation. Sterilization protocol, 0 enacted. Population relocation successful. Cognitive dampening measures are holding, but long-term prognosis is..." The sentence ends there, cut off by the redaction. What is mimetic adaptation? What is a cognitive dampening measure? The document doesn't explain. It only deepens the mystery, twisting it into something far more sinister than a simple cover-up. It suggests the residents of Havenwood weren't just witnesses, they were subjects. The final legible phrase on the page is a handwritten note in the margin next to a heavily redacted chart. It says only 3 words. "They're still calling." This single page doesn't answer the question. It shatters it, replacing it with 1,000 more terrifying inquiries. The threat wasn't in the earth. It was in the air, in the sound, in the very perception of reality. The people of Havenwood weren't evacuated to protect them from their town. They were removed to protect the rest of us from what their town had become. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Narrator. In the labyrinth of secrecy that defined the Cold War's scientific arms race, some minds shone brighter than others. Dr. Aris Thorne was one such mind. A theoretical physicist of unparalleled genius, his name is absent from textbooks, his contributions buried under layers of classification. He was a ghost in the machine, a key player in projects that officially never existed. And then, in the winter of 1973, he vanished. No struggle, no note for his family, just an empty office and a career scrubbed from the records. For decades, his disappearance was a cold case, a footnote in a classified file. But Thorne left something behind. Not a confession, not a warning, but something far more unsettling. A single, cryptic note, found tucked inside a copy of The Metaphysics of Quality on his desk. It wasn't written in plain language. It was a cascade of non-Euclidean geometric symbols, quantum state equations that defied conventional interpretation, and a single, hand-drawn star chart pointing to a constellation that, by all astronomical accounts, shouldn't be visible from our hemisphere. At the very bottom, scrawled with a shaky hand, were 3 words: The question is. The sentence was left unfinished. This note, now declassified but still largely incomprehensible, is our Rosetta Stone. It's the first breadcrumb leading back to the event, the incident so carefully erased from history. What was Thorne working on? The project, codenamed Echelon Echo, had an unlimited budget and zero oversight. Its mandate was vague: the study of non-local phenomena and their potential for strategic application. But Thorne's note suggests something far beyond remote viewing or theoretical weaponry. The equations hint at a breach, a tear in the fabric of what we perceive as reality. The symbols don't belong to any known mathematical language. They feel ancient, almost organic. And the star chart, it points to a void, a dark patch of sky where our most powerful telescopes see nothing but the cold emptiness of space. Was Thorne trying to provide an answer, or was he desperately trying to formulate the question itself? The authorities who seized his research labeled the note as the ramblings of a brilliant mind under immense pressure, a descent into madness. But to those of us in the archive, it looks like a map left by a man who had ventured too far into the dark and realized, too late, that the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't the answer, but the question no one was allowed to ask.
Narrator: a note, however profound, is not proof. It's a key without a lock. To find the door, we had to descend into the bureaucratic underworld, a place of paper trails and ink-stained lies. Our journey began with Project Echelon Echo. Using the Freedom of Information Act, we requested every file associated with it. What we received was a monument to institutional secrecy. Over 10,000 pages, with nearly 95% of the text obscured by thick black lines. It was a masterclass in redaction. But they missed things. In the margins, in the procurement logs, in the seemingly innocuous budget reports, we found the threads. We traced payments for acres of land in the remote Nevada desert, purchased through a series of shell corporations, with names like Celestial Acoustics and Temporal Dynamics Inc. We found requisitions for materials that made no sense for a physics project, tons of lead shielding, geological survey equipment designed for deep earth resonance testing, and curiously, extensive anthropological texts on pre-Columbian mythologies. The paper trail led us from the polished halls of the Pentagon to a single, unassuming warehouse in Baltimore. This warehouse was the registered address for Sintered Solutions, a company that officially manufactured specialized ceramics. But its import-export logs told a different story. They detailed shipments of custom-built cryogenic equipment and advanced signal processors to a location designated only as Site Obsidian. This site didn't appear on any map. It was a ghost, just like Dr. Thorne. The documents painted a picture of a project spiraling, its scope expanding far beyond its initial mandate. Memos, almost entirely redacted, contained fragments of panicked sentences, unforeseen signal amplification, containment protocols failing. The primary subject is not responding as predicted. One partially legible document, a psychological evaluation of the project staff, mentioned a recurring complaint, a shared, auditory hallucination, a low rhythmic hum that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Every document we uncovered only deepened the mystery, pointing towards an experiment that had become something else entirely. They weren't just studying a phenomenon, they were trying to communicate with it. The paper trail showed us the what, the where,
and the when, but it could never tell us the why. For that, we had to keep digging, searching for the ghost of Site Obsidian and the truth behind the question no one was allowed to ask.
Narrator. Paper can be redacted. Memories can fade. But magnetic tape holds echoes. After months of searching, a source deep within the National Archives, who must remain anonymous, provided us with a single reel-to-reel audio tape. The faded label read, EE Log 73 Delta, Site Obsidian, Containment Monitoring. This was it. The voice of the ghost. The recording is dated just 2 days before Dr. Thorne's disappearance. It's over an hour long, and for the first 50 minutes, it is almost entirely silent, punctuated only by the low, ambient hum of machinery. But it's what happens in the final 10 minutes that chills the blood. We've run the audio through every spectrum analyzer and decryption software at our disposal. Let's listen to the raw file. Narrator. That is the hum mentioned in the psych evaluations. According to the log's timecode, its frequency and amplitude began to increase exponentially. Then, a voice. It's panicked. We've identified it as Dr. Alistair Finch, the project's lead geophysicist. Thorne, are you seeing this? The resonance cascade it's off the scale. The core readings are impossible. It's not reflecting, it's responding. Narrator. A second voice appears. It's Dr. Aris Thorne. His tone is not panicked. It's one of awe, of terror. It's beautiful. Alistair, it's been listening this whole time. We thought we were knocking on the door, but it was inviting us in. Narrator. What follows is a series of frantic exchanges, alarms blaring in the background. They speak of geometric propagation and the signal achieving coherence. Then, the hum stops, abruptly. The silence is deafening. And in that silence, something new emerges. It's not a voice. It's not a sound we can classify. It's a complex layered signal that our analysis suggests is a form of non-linear recursive language. It lasted for precisely 3.3 seconds. And within that signal, hidden beneath layers of phase-shifted static, is the anomaly. A human voice, clear as day, speaking a single word. A child's voice. It says, "Hello?" Narrator. The log ends there. The tape runs out. Who was this child? Why was their voice embedded in an impossible signal from deep within the earth? This audio log changes everything. It proves that Project Echelon Echo wasn't a failure. It was a success. They made contact. And in doing so, they stumbled upon the question no one was allowed to ask. Narrator. When a secret of this magnitude is uncovered, the system has a predictable response. It doesn't fight. It suffocates. It smothers the truth under a blanket of mundane, plausible deniability. 2 weeks after Dr. Thorne's disappearance and the shutdown of Site Obsidian, a small, little red article appeared on page 12 of the Las Vegas Sun. It mentioned a series of minor earth tremors in a remote, uninhabited region of the Nevada desert. The cause, according to a hastily prepared statement from the U.S. Geological Survey, was a rare, low-altitude meteorological event. They called it a sonic pressure inversion, a freak weather phenomenon where a pocket of cold air becomes trapped, causing sound waves to focus and impact the ground, mimicking a small earthquake. This was the official story. The lid on the box. The tremors were weather. The massive, multi-million-dollar secret installation was a temporary weather monitoring station. The disappearance of one of the nation's top physicists was an unfortunate, unrelated personal matter. The story was clean, simple, and utterly unbelievable to anyone who had seen the evidence.
How does a weather event generate a coherent mathematical signal from miles below the surface? How does a sonic pressure inversion account for the procurement of anthropological texts on ancient mythology? How does it explain the voice of a child on a secure audio log? It doesn't. The official explanation isn't designed to be believed. It's designed to be a final answer, a full stop for any journalist or investigator who starts asking uncomfortable questions. It's a bureaucratic shield. When we presented our findings, the note, the redacted files, the audio analysis, to government officials, we were met with this same stone wall. That information is classified. We can neither confirm nor deny. And the most common response, your inquiry pertains to a documented meteorological event. They are not just denying the existence of Site Obsidian. They are denying the very possibility of the question. By branding it as weather, they strip it of its intent, its intelligence, its terrifying implications. The cover story is more than just a lie. It's an act of intellectual warfare. It's an attempt to make the profound seem pedestrian, to make the extraordinary seem common. But the archive does not forget. And the official explanation, in its very absurdity, only serves to highlight the importance of the question no one was allowed to ask.
Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors are locked for a reason. Some questions are buried for the survival of the curious. Our investigation begins in the frost-bitten paranoia of the Cold War, a time when humanity perfected the art of self-destruction. We know about the atomic bomb, the hydrogen bomb, weapons that could scorch continents. But the archives, in their hushed and redacted whispers, speak of something else. Not a bigger bomb, but a different kind of power altogether. They called it, in the few declassified fragments we can find, Project Moira, or the Fate Weaver. This wasn't a weapon of annihilation. It was a weapon of alteration. The first theory posits that the question no one was allowed to ask was simple, yet reality-shattering. What did you change? To understand the gravity of this, we must move beyond conventional physics. Project Moira was allegedly based on theoretical temporal mechanics and causality manipulation. It wasn't designed to destroy a target, but to retroactively erase it from the timeline. Imagine a device that could target not a city, but a specific moment in history, a treaty signing, a scientific discovery, the birth of an individual. By activating it, the target and all its subsequent effects would simply cease to have ever existed. The world wouldn't see a crater. It would awaken to a new history, a seamless new present, with no memory of the world that was. The only people who would know are the ones who turned the key. They would be gods living among a populace who never knew they were creations of a revised past. The danger is obvious. If such a weapon were used, how would we know? The evidence of its use would be the very fabric of our current reality. The unaskable question, what did you change, becomes a cognitive explosive. To ask it is to acknowledge that your life, your memories, your history might be a fabrication. The official story is that Project Moira was a catastrophic failure, a theoretical dead end that consumed billions and produced nothing but radiation-scarred tundra in undisclosed locations. But insiders, speaking through encrypted channels and on condition of absolute anonymity, paint a different picture. They speak of a successful test in the late 1970s,
a minor correction to a geopolitical crisis. The world breathed a sigh of relief as tensions inexplicably cooled. But a handful of scientists and generals knew the truth. They had pruned a branch of history. The question was forbidden, classified beyond top secret, not to protect the technology, but to protect sanity itself. Because if you can ask, "What did you change?" you are immediately forced to ask the follow-up, "Who were we before?" And that is a truth the human mind was not built to contain. If the first theory is grounded in the terrifying potential of human invention, our second theory ventures into the cosmic, into the very code of our existence. This school of thought dismisses Project Moira as a sophisticated piece of disinformation, a convenient, man-made horror to distract from a truth that is far more alien and uncontrollable. This theory suggests the unaskable question is not about what we did to our past, but what is fundamentally wrong with our present. It begins with anomalies, not bombs or secret projects, but subtle, persistent glitches in the matrix of the universe. For decades, astronomers have noted minute, inexplicable variations in the cosmic microwave background radiation, the echo of the Big Bang. SETI listening posts have recorded structured, non-random signals that last for mere picoseconds before vanishing. Quantum experiments yield results that seem to defy their own statistical predictions. Individually, these are curiosities. Collectively, they form a chilling pattern. This theory proposes that our reality is not a stable, singular construct. It is damaged. There is a fracture, a tear in space-time, a seam where the laws of physics become frayed and unpredictable. The late, controversial physicist, Dr. Aris Thorne, whose work was posthumously suppressed, called it the universal suture. He believed an unknown event, perhaps primordial, or perhaps caused by an intelligence beyond our scope, wounded the universe. We are living on the scar tissue. The question, no one was allowed to ask in Thorne's view, was a diagnostic one. What is the nature of the flaw? To ask it, to even scientifically model it, would be like pressing on a wound. It could draw the attention of whatever exists on the other side of the tear. It could destabilize the fragile constants that keep our reality coherent. Phenomena like the Mandela effect or the pervasive feeling of déjà vu are not, in this theory, tricks of the memory. They are tremors along the fault line. They are moments when our consciousness perceives the flicker, the brief overlap with a reality where things are slightly different. Thorne's final paper, which exists only in fragmented password-protected files, argued that the question itself has a certain resonance, a frequency that interacts with the tear. To pursue the answer is to risk widening the gap, to invite something else in. The official narrative is that Dr. Thorne suffered a mental breakdown, obsessed with cosmic patterns that weren't there. But his colleagues remember a brilliant, stable man who grew increasingly terrified. A man who claimed his lab equipment was showing him things that should not be. He wasn't afraid of a weapon. He was afraid that our universe was a compromised system, and someone or something was about to discover the back door. Every investigation, every documentary you have ever watched is built on a foundation of evidence, a photograph, a document, a witness testimony. It is the bedrock of truth. But what if the subject of your investigation actively resists being known? What if the phenomenon you are chasing has an immune system that attacks and destroys proof? This brings us to the most confounding aspect of our search, and our third theory, the paradox of the missing evidence. This theory proposes that the reason we have no definitive proof of a temporal weapon or a tear in reality is because the phenomenon itself is information phobic. It actively erases its own trail. Consider this. An archivist working deep in a secure government facility stumbles upon a file designated Moira. As he reads the first sentence, the ink on the page begins to fade, turning the paper into a meaningless blank sheet before his very eyes. A satellite astronomer captures a definitive image of the universal suture, but when she transfers the data, the file is irrevocably corrupted, a stream of digital noise. A whistleblower prepares to go public, but the night before the interview suffers a unique form of amnesia, forgetting not who he is, but the specific knowledge he intended to share. These are not acts of human conspiracy. There are no men in black coats, no cleanup crews. This is a fundamental law of the universe we are only just beginning to perceive. The suppression is automated, impersonal, and absolute. The unaskable question in this context is not just a question. It is a trigger. It is a mimetic key that, once formulated in a conscious mind, flags that mind and all its associated research for deletion by this cosmic immune system. The question might be something like, what is the mechanism that hides itself? By asking it, you become the evidence, and all evidence must be erased. This explains the perfect, almost surgical absence of proof. There are no clumsy cover-ups, no suspicious deaths that can be traced back to an agency. There are only clean gaps, empty file cabinets that records show were once full. Researchers who simply retire or change fields for no apparent reason. It's a paradox. The only evidence that something is being hidden is the impossibly perfect nature of the hiding itself. This theory suggests we are not just observers of the universe. We are participants in a system that has rules. And the primary rule is that its fundamental nature must never be fully understood by its inhabitants. The question is unaskable not because a government forbids it, but because reality itself does. We have journeyed through theories of temporal weapons, cosmic wounds, and a reality that actively conceals itself. We have stood at the edge of an abyss of knowledge, trying to give it a name. But now, we must confront the final layer of this mystery, the question itself. What could it be? What combination of words could be so powerful, so dangerous, that it must be buried under layers of secrecy, fear, and paradox? The truth is, we will not state the question here. To do so would be irresponsible, a violation of the very warnings this investigation has uncovered. But we can describe its properties. We can outline the shape of the hole it leaves in our understanding. The unaskable question is not one of science or history. It is a question of ontology, the study of being. It is not what happened or how does it work, but more likely, what are we? The answer, it is believed, is a form of knowledge so fundamentally incompatible with human consciousness that it acts as a cognitive poison. Think of a computer virus that isn't made of code, but of pure information. An idea that, once understood, would overwrite the core programming of our minds, our sense of self, our perception of linear time, our definition of life. Let us synthesize our theories. What if a temporal weapon, Project Moira, was used? And what if its use didn't just alter history, but damage the fabric of reality itself, creating the tear Dr. Thorne feared? This would mean we are living in a broken, edited copy of a universe. The unaskable question, then, might be the one that forces us to perceive the original, to see the seams and the edits.
It would be the ultimate red pill. The answer would reveal that our reality is artificial, our memories implanted, our history a lie. Not a lie told by governments, but a lie told by the universe itself to protect us from the truth of our own fractured existence. The question is unaskable because the answer would be the equivalent of a human being suddenly gaining the sensory input of a fourth spatial dimension. A revelation so overwhelming it would induce a terminal state of psychosis in every person who understood it. Society would not collapse, it would dissolve. Each mind would become an island, lost in a sea of unbearable truth. So we leave you here, at the threshold. The question slumbers in the silence between anomalies, in the redactions of old files, in the unsettling feeling that the world is not quite right. It is not our place to ask it for you. The true horror is that, having watched this, having followed this trail of breadcrumbs into the dark, a part of your mind may have already begun to formulate it on its own. And once that process begins, it cannot be stopped.